on this edition of Next Africa. Congo in crisis. As the conflict in the eastern DRC reaches a peak not seen in at least a decade, we'll explore the political and economic consequences. Also coming up, we visit Cape Town to find out how electric buses are helping to drive the city's green transport ambitions. Plus, we'll speak to the CEO of Africa's biggest wireless carrier, MTN, about the future of telecoms on the continent. Welcome to Next Africa. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, and this month we will wade into the continent's oldest active armed conflict, and that's the crisis in Congo. Tensions erupted again this year when the rebel M23 group expanded its control in the eastern part of the country, capturing the cities of Bukavu and Goma, choking off supplies of tin ore, coltan, and minerals key for chip production and mobile phones. The rebels are said to be backed by Rwanda, according to the United Nations, something Rwanda's president, though, strongly denies.
These people, the ones who lead this, and then the other hundreds of groups fighting in eastern Congo, have nothing to do with Rwanda.
Nonetheless, the U.S. and EU have said they would penalize Rwandan officials and members of M23, and we've already seen that financial pressure coming in the form of sanctions. Tensions, though, did ease slightly when a surprise meeting between President Kagame and his Congolese counterpart, mediated by Qatar, saw the two commit to a ceasefire. I'm joined now by Simon Marks in Nairobi and Andira Oganga out of Kigali. They've both been following the story for us quite closely. Let's just start with you, Simon. Talk to us about history and the history point that we're at right now. Are we just repeating what we've seen over the past few decades when it comes to these two countries?
Well, in many ways, yes, is the simple answer. This whole dispute originates in the mid-90s in the aftermath of the genocide in Rwanda, which kills around 800,000, mostly Tutsi Rwandans, resulting in many Hutus flooding over the border into Congo. And some of those people started a militia groups, a rebellion. And I think essentially the international community, Congo, Rwanda, have never managed to settle this big security threat right on Rwanda's border. And if you listen to President Paul Kagame, he's often talking about the need to secure the rights of Congolese Tutsis inside Congo and Rwandan speakers, but also assure that Hutu militia groups inside Congo are not a threat to Rwandan national security. And then on the flip side, I think Congo's concerns have never been addressed. Really, they see that the M23 Tutsi-led rebel group are simply a violation of their territory and are there to traffic a lot of its immense mineral wealth in eastern Congo out of the country and into Rwanda. And so they see this more as a threat to them economically and also a big threat to its sovereignty. So I think the stalls were set very early on, and that has not changed.
And Simon, just talk about the natural resources that play into this conflict. It's not just in the DRC. A lot of illegal mining is happening throughout the continent. But talk about how the fight over natural resources is at the heart of a lot of conflicts that we are seeing in the region.
Yes. So, I mean, as mentioned, eastern DRC is extremely rich in minerals such as coltan, tin, manganese, and so far we've seen, even prior to the huge explosion of violence in January, the M23 got their hands on the Rubaya mine in North Kivu, which is the region's biggest coltan mine. And UN experts have documented how much of the production from this mine has been trafficked over the border into Rwanda and mixed with Rwandan production. That's something Rwanda obviously denies. But indeed, these allegations were the reason that the European Union, part of the reason that the EU just this week brought down sanctions on Rwanda and also a Rwandan gold refinery. And we've seen this in other places in Africa. In Sudan, there's a lot of supply chain risk for companies dealing with commodities such as gold, where there's a huge trafficking and smuggling of gold out of the country, and also commodities like gum arabic, which is used in everything from Coca-Cola to Pepsi. And we've seen companies having to pay extortion, fees. They've had their rights abuses by militia groups in Sudan fighting a civil war there. And that obviously is huge exposure for consumers and businesses around the world.
Yeah, and Simon, we know that you've been following this closely and have done a lot of reporting on this. I want to turn to Indira because she's also been on the ground reporting inside some of the mining operations, at least as it pertains to Rwanda. Indira, talk to us about what you're seeing and how it is affecting the sector more broadly.
Hi, Jen. So the effect is yet to take shape. The numbers are yet to reflect. But what we're seeing is that the Rwandan government is doing everything that it can, one, to maintain calm locally, but also to restore faith and confidence globally. The Rwanda Mines Board sponsored journalists to go to the mines, see the mines, the production of these minerals. And this was in a bid to counter the accusation that is coming from DRC that Rwanda is stealing their minerals, smuggling them into the global ecosystem, and then getting the financial gains that should have gone to DRC instead. And when we were there, I spoke to Ray Powers, who's the CEO of Powers International Limited, and I asked him if he's fazed about the ongoing geopolitical tension and the effect of sanctions, and this is what he told me.
I still see the minerals moving. Nothing seems to have changed. There's an awful lot of politics going on in the world. That's kind of not our business. Our job is to dig with excellence and produce with perfection. If people want to buy, that's up to them.
Jen, that is the general sentiment in the private sector and even in government. I spoke to the Minister of Finance and asked him, does he see this mounting international pressure and also growing sanctions affecting Rwanda? And he said the economy is strong and whatever shocks will come, Rwanda will be able to absorb comfortably in the meantime.
Fascinating sound that you got there. Indira Oganga in Kigali and Simon Marks in Nairobi, thank you both so much for your reporting and for joining us this month. Now, I dug a bit deeper into the global impact of Congo's cobalt ban. I spoke with Thomas Matthews. He's the battery materials analyst at the CRU Group. Take a listen.
Since the ban has been announced and put into place, we've seen that prices of a variety of different cobalt-containing materials have increased. So cobalt hydroxide, which is the material that the DRC produces and has hence been banned from being exported, prices of that have increased by more than 50%. The same for cobalt sulfate, and actually we've seen prices of sulfate reaching the highest levels in the past 18 months. And we've seen significant price rises for a variety of other different materials. We've seen major producers have been forced to declare force majeure, unable to meet contractual deliveries.
So if you think about that then, Thomas, is the intended achievement by DRC, are they likely to achieve their goals, especially if you consider what you're saying, that we're seeing prices start to cool down?
Now is the time that it's being implemented. I guess the key to how successful this ban will be is what happens afterwards. So we've heard that just in the past couple of days that the government is planning to lift the ban after 4 months, given the strong price reaction that we've seen, and implement an export quota system. Exactly how that quota system would work, I think, is probably still being ironed out. But it is likely, I think, to mean that we'll see some sustained price support in the longer term.
That was Thomas Matthews, battery materials analyst at the CRU Group, speaking with us. Now, coming up, battery powered. The journey to electric for Cape Town Bus Company is coming up next. You're watching Next Africa. Now, a South African mass transit company is taking the lead in embracing the future of electric buses and the environment. I traveled to Cape Town to see how Golden Arrow hopes to cut its emissions with the help of China's biggest EV maker. Take a look. Rush hour in Cape Town. Transport's a major source of emissions, but one bus company is trying to foster change. Golden Arrow transports over 240,000 commuters daily across the city. It's in the process of replacing 10% of its 1,100-strong fleet with electric models made by China's BYD.
We're buying something like 25 million litres of diesel every single year. So we needed to look at what was possible.
Bloomberg NEF estimates that e-buses globally will save the equivalent of almost 2 million barrels of oil demand per week.
Electric buses are playing a really important role in reducing emissions. What we can see is that about 250,000 barrels of oil demand per day are being displaced by electric buses around the world. That's initially been led out of China, but we're now seeing rapid uptake in places like Africa and other parts of the world. And then the second area is around improving urban air quality through things like reducing NOx emissions, nitrogen oxide emissions, and particulate emissions.
BYD buses are found in over 300 cities worldwide.
By purchasing 120 buses, we are literally reducing our carbon output by 10%, which is significant, and obviously hoping to make our air healthier, reduce our carbon emissions.
These buses are shipped fully assembled from Asia to Cape Town. But that's something President Cyril Ramaphosa wants to change. South Africa will soon offer 150% tax break for local EV production. The hope is that companies like BYD will start manufacturing their vehicles locally, lowering costs for buyers and creating jobs. Globally, electric bus sales fell 27% in 2023 as Chinese sales and incentives in the U.S. slowed. While the market may get a boost from Europe as buses there transition to zero emissions in the years ahead, the real growth is expected to come from the developing world. And hopes for the environment will ride on expectations there will be more bus companies in Africa fueling a greener expansion. Well, as global demand for batteries increases, concerns have been raised about the environmental impact of mining the materials needed to power them. The Global Battery Alliance is helping to establish a sustainable battery value chain by 2030. I spoke to the group's executive director, Inga Petersen. Here's what she told us.
There's a lot of, political spinning of the EV debate around all the negative impacts of extraction. I think refocusing that debate on the lifetime benefits of EVs, whether it comes to recyclability of the materials, the inherent value in the battery, but also some of the tangential benefits, it's still an underutilized product. So using an EV to get from A to B is great, but once you get into vehicle-to-grid integration, vehicle-to-home integration, you basically have a network of decentralized energy storage, which can be a huge enabling factor for, taking that leap really into the energy transition.
And you were saying focusing more on upstream versus downstream in terms of the debate?
So the Global Battery Alliance brings all the full value chain together, from mining companies to cell makers, car manufacturers, recyclers, to scale a sustainable, circular and responsible battery value chain by 2030. And what we start with is, how do we scale this rapidly, the battery industry, but how do we do it with social, environmental and governance guardrails placed on it? And that you cannot achieve that unless you have collective action that spans the value chain. So we need transparency over the impacts and benefits. But then also, we need data. Like, we cannot improve what we can't measure. So one of the instruments we've been putting forward is the battery passport, a digital product passport for batteries that has the provenance information on the material flow data together with technical data, but also then key sustainability metrics. So what does a sustainable product look like? And then that goes back to your previous question on how do you use that to also instill consumer confidence. You can purchase this product. Here's the evidence base that it has not been produced with child labor or with adverse environmental effects. This is the battery carbon footprint. This is how it compares to emissions of an ICE over the same period of time.
Coming up, my interview with the CEO of African mobile giant MTN. We talk geopolitics, technology, and the challenges and opportunities of doing business on the continent. But first, hear why one South African fund manager believes the continent is rife with opportunity.
We all understand the economic opportunity, 2.8% of GDP, global GDP, 18% of the world's population that's likely to double just within our lifetime. Now, obviously, what that means is a significant demand for basic infrastructure, for goods, for services that all of these consumers demand. At the same time, there's precious little capital that's really flown into Africa if you compare it to the global picture. And so as a result, there's a supply-demand mismatch that gets created. And we're really sitting on the supply of that side. So our ability to negotiate strong terms with our underlying investment companies is really part of the key to the success.
Digital connectivity in Africa is evolving at an unprecedented pace. Still, nearly 1 billion people on the continent remain unconnected to mobile internet, with high costs being a major factor. The sector, though, has huge growth potential driven by a young population and rising demand for mobile services for businesses. Some might say Africa is the wireless continent. With landlines less than 5% of all telecoms, mobile networks completely dominate. Not surprisingly, the competition for customers is fierce, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Growth is the name of the game, with the number of mobile subscribers expected to climb from 527 million in 2023 to more than 750 million unique users by 2030. While many nations have state-controlled companies, there are a handful of giant network providers. Household name brands include MTN, Vodacom, Orange, and Airtel. And they're chasing what's expected to be $61 billion in total revenues by 2030. With demand for wireless internet services surging among consumers and businesses, ranging from mobile payment systems and insurance, entertainment, and e-travel, the drive for customers across Africa is only expected to grow more intense. Well, Africa's young, tech-savvy population is increasingly using mobile phones to bridge gaps in services, including banking. I spoke to the Group CEO of Africa's biggest wireless company, MTN, about plans to spin off their financial technology operations, future opportunities, AI, and so much more. But I started by asking Ralph Mupita about the impact U.S.-China competition on the continent is having on their business.
We're very mindful of these geopolitical forces, but we're trying to be neutral. The two big elephants, kind of on a safari, and we just don't want to get in the way. And I think, that's pretty much what most businesses in Africa are trying to do. We've been developing. We invest about $2 billion per annum in capital expenditure, upgrading our networks and covering more people, building capacity in our networks. As we move through the technology cycles, 3G to 4G to 5G, we've actually been able to buy more with that $2 billion envelope as prices are coming down for radios, we invest in the core, etc. So I wouldn't say we've benefited from it in particular. I think we've just been smart around how we procure, because the average customer that we serve, we're making, average revenue per user, $2 to $3. In some markets, maybe as high as $5, but not too many markets. So we have to make do. We have to make our investment go a very long way. And the way we procure technology then becomes, super, super critical.
How far out do you see artificial intelligence then benefiting a lot of your customers and the people on the continent here? Because in a lot of other parts of the world, many people are pouring money into AI right now. Do you see this a little bit further out, though, the advent of AI for the continent being a little bit further out?
Yeah, I went to a Microsoft conference in Seattle about 2 years ago, and the topic for 2 days was AI, and the conversations was how much investments, how these large language models were being developed, what data sets were they ingesting, and so forth. And I left there after 2 days. I said, "Wow, man, there's no Africa in this conversation, none whatsoever." But fast forward 2 years later. I think, quite a lot of development has happened. A lot more African languages are, going into these models. And I guess if you hark back to, let's say, the smartphone era. And the smartphone era, we saw that initially the smartphones weren't available for Africans, but there was a rapid catch-up in development.
Ralph, when we think about sort of what you have to oversee, you were recently with all of the CEOs from MTN from across the continent. How many are there? 7?
Yeah, 17 markets.
17, okay.
Yeah, 17.
But, I say that to say they're very different markets, right? How do you navigate the challenges of markets that have currency volatility versus, war-torn countries? I mean, what is sort of your thinking in overseeing these different markets?
We're able to leapfrog challenges that people generally have, telecommunications being one, and kind of bringing people to the internet. The other is financial inclusion. banks and insurers have done great work, but a lot of Africans are still left out of decent financial services, and we've stepped into that breach to drive inclusion. I think the thing that when you look at Africa, and we often look at the structural trends. So if we believe in the structural trends, we'll sustain the investment. I mean, we had some difficulties, let's say in a market like Nigeria last year, with the significant currency devaluation. But underneath all of that, we said, well, hang on, there's demand for data is significant. We have to sustain the investment and so forth. So, I mean, finally, we're an African company. We've got nowhere else to go. We have to figure out, the solutions to some of the challenges. But, we're passionate about the continent's development.
But you have made some exits in other parts of the world that weren't necessarily serving that mantra, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, we also have to look at, we have finite resources. We have finite capital. We have finite, bandwidth as a management and a board. And so we've exited some small markets like Guinea-Bissau and Guinea-Conakry. And we're always on the lookout, are there markets that we need to go into? We haven't entered any, but we always apply our minds. Are there markets where we can make a difference, we can make a return, and so forth? But, we have 290 million subscribers, more or less, who are using an MTN SIM every day. Yeah, so we've got a lot of customers to look after and, deliver services to them.
Have you thought about potential partners for the fintech business?
Yeah, we've already made some progress there. We're talking to MasterCard. They're going to take up a stake that will probably be about 4%. And the board has appetite that we have minority investments up to 30%. We're not putting ourselves under pressure to do this quickly. So we'll do this as and when it makes sense and ensure that we have the right shareholding structure. And more importantly, the right kind of capabilities, the right technology and platforms to make sure that this business remains relevant the next 5 to 10 years.
Potentially private equity? Would you look to private equity investors?
We would look at the right financial investor who could support us to accelerate the growth of business faster, not just that they write a check. So, yeah, as I mentioned, we're happy to go up to 30% there within the fintech business.
Could we see some of that development in 2025, or you're saying you want to take your time with this?
You might see it, you might not see it, so we would move as quickly as we see. I mean, we're always talking to people. And so, if something makes sense, we will consummate a relationship or a transaction. But we're not putting pressure on ourselves to say, you must do X by Y. I mean, I have shareholders, some will say, you're moving a little bit too fast. Why don't you slow down? Some say move faster. So there isn't like a pressing push to bring shareholders into the fintech platform like ASAP. We will do it on an organic basis at a pace that we feel is natural as the business is evolving.
And that was MTN Group CEO Mupita speaking with me earlier. And don't forget, your Next Africa programming isn't limited to just once a month. Be sure to tune into our weekly podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you usually get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to our bi-weekly Next Africa newsletter, available on the terminal and websites for even more reporting from the Bloomberg team. But for now, that is all that we have time for today. Join us again next month. For now, I'm Jennifer Zapasada in Johannesburg. We'll see you next time.